Good afternoon. I'm Ian Olver. It's my privilege to be chair of the Sax Institute board. I've done that task for 3 years, most of which, of course, has been during COVID. But I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we all work, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are with us today. I'm on the land of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. So I'd like to start, we've got a few more to join us and they will join us in time, but I'd like to start by introducing the fact that we have 2 new board directors since over this past year. One is Dr. Lisa Studdert. She is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at the National Disability Insurance Agency, and she was previously Deputy Secretary at the Federal Department of Health, where she worked across a range of portfolios, including population health, aged care, Indigenous health and cancer screening. She's extensive working experience overseas, including for the United Nations Agency and the Australian Aid Program, with extended periods in Indonesia, Cambodia and Afghanistan. So I think you can see that her breadth of expertise both at home and abroad is going to be very valuable on the board of the Sax Institute. The second new director is Professor David Whiteman. He's actually a medical epidemiologist at QIMR Berghofer Medical Research Institute in Brisbane, where he was Deputy Director from 2016 to 21. He has a special interest in the causes, control and prevention of cancer, and actually leads a program of research comprising national and international studies, particularly in melanoma, but other cancers as well. He is a Fellow of the Australian Academy of Health and Medical Sciences and also a Fellow of the Australasian Faculty of Public Health Medicine and a member of the Academy of the National Health and Medical Research Council of Australia. I just have a couple of housekeeping announcements. When we come to the question time, please use the chat function to record your questions. And I do want you to note that the meeting is being recorded. The next thing I want to apprise you of is new members, and I'd like to introduce a series of our new members who have joined over the last 12 months. First is Professor Mira Agar, who's a member for improving palliative, aged and chronic care through clinical research and translation, the so-called IMPACT at the University of Technology, Sydney. Then we have Professor Billy Bonevsky, a member of the Flinders Institute for Health and Medical Research at Flinders University in Adelaide. Professor Henry Broderty, who's a member of the Centre for Health Brain Ageing at the University of New South Wales. Professor Julie Biles, who's representing the Hunter Medical Research Institute. Professor David Currow, who's a representative of the University of Wollongong. Professor Anne Cust, who's a member of the Daffodil Centre, Cancer Council of New South Wales and the University of Sydney. It's a joint initiative of those 2 organisations. Professor Rachel Davey is a member for the Health Research Institute at the University of Canberra. Professor Christopher Fairley is a member for the Melbourne Sexual Health Centre at Alfred Health. Professor Terry Haynes is a member for the School of Primary and Allied Health Care at Monash University. Professor Deborah Loxton is a member for the Centre for Women's Health Research at the University of Newcastle. Dr. Sarah Oxford is a member for the Institute for Safety, Compensation and Recovery Research at Monash University. Professor Philarith Pongsavan is a representative of the University of Sydney, and Dr. Janani Shantosh is a member of the Australian Human Rights Institute at the University of New South Wales. And the last is Professor Mark Stuve, who's a representative of the Burnett Institute. We have a couple of organisations that have resigned, but only because they have ceased operation, and that's the Dementia Centre for Research Collaboration at the University of New South Wales and Women and Babies Research at the University of Sydney. Now, I'd like to just spend a few minutes at this stage highlighting some of the features for us of last year, and I'm going to start from the end first, actually, because I have a really important announcement, and that is that at our last board meeting, we accepted the notice of retirement of our CEO, Sally Redman. Now, as you well know, Sally has been the CEO for the entire span of the Sax Institute, over 2 decades, and we are really grateful for the work she has done in building up the Sax Institute, and she's had a wide range of people that she's engaged with, and it is a very robust organisation today, and we can see how much it's grown. Now, a lot more will be said in coming weeks about the role of Sally, but I'd just like to start by saying we've been incredibly grateful for her contribution to the Sax Institute and her leadership and the way that it's flourished under that leadership. We'll be very sorry to see her go, but we wish her well in her retirement, and we're just grateful that she's been with us for the time that she has, which is a remarkably long time. So although the World Health Organization in the second half of 2022 believed that the end was nigh for the global COVID-19 pandemic, I think it's fair to say that most of the last year we've still been under the constraints of that pandemic, and certainly all our Sax Institute board meetings and things have been virtual, and we've had to operate with finding a new normal for staff presenting in person and working from home. But I'm pleased to say that during this time, the Sax Institute has actually continued to provide their robust evidence-based approaches that have assisted governments and health service providers to respond to the pandemic, as well as the many other health policy areas that we get into. But we've had staff co-opted to New South Wales Health, and we've certainly provided information and rapid reviews and things to help formulate policy in this time. And so I think we've been able to adapt to the circumstance and provide valued information to government. But also within our own organisation, we've been undergoing a transformation, and this has occurred under, I think, 3 main headings. One is our governance, one is membership engagement, and the final one is our work in Aboriginal health. And just to mention a few things about those, I think in terms of governance, we had a rather large board, and a couple of years ago we decided that our board represented a rather historic way of doing boards. We needed a more flexible board, a skill-based board that had expertise in the governance requirements of an organisation such as the Sax. So we decided to create a smaller skill-based board that was better able to advise and guide the organisation, particularly in various innovations and endeavours which were coming up on the horizon. But secondly, we also sought to engage with the membership, and another benefit of the Institute's government changes is it's allowed us to re-energise our relationship with members. And I think things like the Sax Forum have been a fantastic way of engaging with members. We've had at some stages over 200 people attending our Sax Forums, and several collaborative projects have emerged from that. So rather than the main point of contact being the board representation, we've sought to have regular contact with our members in the areas that they think are most relevant. And we've seen a 15% increase in our member numbers, but most most gratifyingly, there's been a 44% increase in the non-New South Wales membership, which shows that we're increasingly fulfilling our role as a national organisation. And when you put that together with the Institute's peer-reviewed journal, Public Health Research and Practice, we're making an impact in the area of our expertise. We also have energised our work in Aboriginal health, and I'm delighted to note that during this last year, with the formulation of the Institute's first Reconciliation Action Plan, which was drafted during the course of the year and received provisional approval from Reconciliation Australia pending the finalisation of the document. So I'd like to thank and congratulate everyone involved with that, because it's a milestone for us. But we've also, of course, continued our work in the various projects we've had, including the long-running nationally influential SEARCH, which stands for Study of Environment on Aboriginal Resilience and Child Health Project, and we're looking for other collaborations which we'll detail in the course of our annual report. So I think we're looking at a growingly mature organisation that's looking to become more flexible to meet the challenges of a rapidly changing future. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow board directors for their advice and guidance. I particularly note Mr. Michael Lambert and Mr. Chris Paxton, who were long-standing board members who finished their terms during this last year, but provided us with very sound advice, particularly on the financial and business side of the organisation. And in doing that, as you've seen, we've added 2 new directors with a broad range of skills. And finally, of course, I'd like to thank the staff who have been enormously resilient right throughout what I think is 3 years effectively of COVID. They've kept the organisation's goals firmly in sight, and they've kept the organisation incredibly productive. And we still have challenges in the post-COVID era, but we have great confidence by the way the staff have managed during the COVID. So I'd like to thank them for their continued dedication and hard work. And particularly, I'd like to again thank Sally, not only for the 2 decades, but particularly for last year when she has managed these additional challenges extremely well. So that's, in summary, what I think are some of the things that I'd like to highlight about the last year. And now I'd like to introduce to you Melinda Ewell, who's Head of Finance, to present the financial statement. So Melinda, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm just going to share a summary of our financials. I'm hoping everyone can see that slide. So what I'm showing you at the moment is just a high-level summary of the financials for the Sax Institute. This previous year, which is financial year 22, we achieved a deficit result of $830,000. This was a planned deficit because investments were made in innovation, strengthening our systems, and reform of the corporate services area. These investments that we've made, though, we're expecting to pay dividends over the next few years in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of our systems and programs. Our financial position and balance sheet remain strong. So our net assets and cash balances actually remain strong, and our current ratio is around 1.1. Over time, our revenue has, this is just a demonstration of our revenue over time. Last year, we achieved $14.4 million worth of revenue, and we note that at the end of June, we had $19.5 million worth of work on hand for the future periods. Ian, I'll hand back to you now, if you like.
Thank you. I think we'll take queries at the end, but if you have a question, please put that in the chat. I now want to have a session where we highlight a couple of the new initiatives that we've been developing over this past year and that will look to the future. And I'm going to invite Sally to talk about the Sax Sonar, because we need you to submit ideas on that. But Sally, if you could, our CEO, if you could present our thoughts to date on the Sax Sonar.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian. And of course, the trickiest point in the meeting for me, will I be able to? Yeah. Okay. So look, we've actually talked, I think, a couple of times about this, but we're really sort of ready to go on it now. Can everybody see that? Can you see that okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
So look, basically, we feel that we do a lot of work with government, as Ian's already mentioned in his comments, but by and large, this is kind of responsive. So, if you like, it's a kind of a pull from government. They ask us for an evaluation or a review, and we've been reflecting over the last few years about how we can do a better job of pushing out the really important findings and understandings that come from research. We've got a few things that people might have seen or heard about, and perhaps noticeably the journal, Public Health Research and Practice, which I'm really proud to tell everybody is now the top listed public health services journal in Australia, which is great, fantastic. But I think we also have wanted to develop an approach that we can use to try and bring really new developments that have potential of great importance for policy and service provision into the future. So we kind of want to push the time horizon out a little bit from the immediate and the medium term to the medium and the longer term. So we're thinking about things that are important in terms of paradigm shifts or ways of thinking. That could be pieces of data that have really big implications, or they might be big sort of movements, like, say, for example, a few years ago, many people in the research community were talking about systems approaches. This kind of language has now been adopted, I think, by policy agencies, but that wasn't for a while. So that would be the sort of things that we're thinking about. So we're planning to have what we're calling Sax Sonar, and I would say that today we regard as a soft launch of it. So I hope people will come with a few ideas about where we might start to focus. But essentially, the kinds of ideas, they might be local or national, or they could be something that's going on internationally that you think is important to inform the sort of longer term thinking of policy here. I think often it'll be more than one study, although it could be one really exceptional study, but mostly it'll be a body of work. And the idea is that it's new or emerging, I think. And we need to have somebody locally, somebody from our Sax Forum group who would be willing to be the person or people involved in drawing attention to this. So what we would think to do is we call it starting the call today for proposals from Sax Forum members for issues or topics that might be relevant. We'll then try and organise a roundtable to discuss the proposals and prepare a written report highlighting the findings and implications. So with the roundtable, we're envisaging that we invite relevant policymakers to hear about this and why we think it's important. That's sort of the background. And so I kind of think when we invited you, we asked whether anybody would have suggestions that might be interesting issues to get started on. And if I could just take a moment to ask people to see whether anybody here wants to put their hand up and get us started on this. I hope it's not a surprise to be asked. So do feel free to put something in the chat function, or alternately to put up your hand and raise any issues. I see David Currow's here. I wonder, David, have you got anything that you might want to put forward? Sorry to put you on the spot. Is everybody muted, perhaps? No. Anybody would like to volunteer? Okay. Please use the chat function during the rest of the meeting to send your ideas, or if you don't want to do it online, then do give me a call afterwards. We'd love to have some great ideas here to take forward, but in the interest of Ian of moving the meeting forward, we might want to perhaps let Martin talk about 45 and up, and then come back to this a bit later on.
Okay, thanks very much, Sally. And yes, we welcome your ideas on the Sax sonar and how we can best utilise that. But for the moment, I'd like to invite our Deputy CEO, Martin McNamara, to talk about the 45 and up study. This has been a flagship study. But of course, it's evolving, I think, and it could be, even more valuable going forward. So I'd like you to, if we talk about new initiatives, I hand over to Martin to tell you about the 45 and up study. Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Dan. I just want to check that people can see my slides at the moment. Is that working out okay?
Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah, okay, great. So thanks for the opportunity to talk, and I think we did want to share some developments and opportunities with you all that are going on at the moment with the study, bring you up to date. And I see there's a few familiar faces that have joined us. So some of you will already know about some of this work, and some of you may be less familiar with it. So, of course, happy to answer questions that emerge, but also happy to have some conversations individually after this session as well, if there's things of interest that I go through today. So just as a start point, I know there is some familiarity with 45 and up in this meeting today, but in terms of a background, 45 and up was set up as a national resource really to inform policy and practice, and it was set up back in the 2005 to 2009 period. So at that time, we recruited over 267,000 people in New South Wales to participate in the study. And the basic model for 45 and up involves all participants receiving a survey every 5 years, but they also consent to linking their survey data with a range of administrative data sets that really creates a powerful linked data asset that can be used in lots of different ways. And in fact, it's been used by over 800 researchers to date, and we recently reached the milestone of 500 publications using survey data. So clearly it's been widely used for lots of different research purposes. And one of the other key features of the study is the ability to establish sub-studies within the cohort. And at any one time, we've got a number of sub-studies going on of particular interest to different researchers that we work with. So that's also an option for people who are interested in undertaking a study within the cohort. So in brief, people that are less familiar with the study may be curious about what's covered in the previous survey. So there has been 3 rounds of surveys that have gone to the whole cohort to date. And we've generally covered these sorts of topics. So we've certainly covered a lot to do with health status, including things like functional status, disability, mental health and wellbeing. We covered a lot of issues around healthcare, including access and utilisation and where people have missed out on care that they might have liked to have received. There's been lots of work done in these surveys on determinants of health, both the social and economic determinants of health, as well as some of the lifestyle and behavioural issues. And more recently, we've done a lot of work on the impact of COVID on the participants. And we've actually created a new facility within 45 and up, a new rapid survey facility to understand the impacts of the pandemic, but also to understand how behaviours and attitudes have changed during the course of the pandemic. And that's been really important in informing lots of the response to the pandemic, actually. So I want to talk about all of this in a bit more detail in a moment, but one thing I think it's worth sharing with you is the sort of diversity in the cohort and how that might have shifted over time since we established it back in 2005. And we are getting a lot more interest in from researchers in some of these sectors. So as you'd expect with a cohort of this type, lots of participants are now moving into aged care facilities. So we've got over 10,000 participants that are now in aged care facilities, and also a substantial number that are receiving care in the home. So that provides a new sort of opportunity for research, as does the numbers of participants that now have dementia. So we're at over 15,000 that have now have dementia in the cohort. Another important opportunity that lots of researchers are getting more interested in. There is a pretty large percentage of the cohort that are residing in the most disadvantaged parts of the state, and that's also an area that's emerging interest amongst the research community. There's around 50% of the cohort in rural areas and 11% culturally and linguistically diverse. And then I haven't broken this down by all the different chronic conditions that might be applicable, but clearly there's increasing rates of chronic disease in the population as the participants age. So 37% have got chronic disease, but 36 have got 2 or more chronic diseases. So that really is just a bit of a whistle stop to a 45 and up before I wanted to move to some of what the upcoming opportunities are. So some of you in the call will already be aware of this, but we are about to enter that 4th round of surveying the whole cohort. So we expect there'll be about 200,000 participants eligible to be surveyed from around May next year. We expect to do that survey over several years of 200,000 participants, and we are in a consultation phase at the moment, talking extensively to researchers, but also to policymakers and non-government organisations about the sort of focus areas that might be accommodated in those surveys. So if that's something that you or your organisation are interested in, please do get in touch with us. There is a sort of a window of opportunity to incorporate some of your interest areas into that survey. The second sort of opportunity is what I referred to earlier in this presentation that we established during the start of the COVID pandemic, actually. And that's the rapid survey capacity that we've created in 45 and up. At the moment, that survey capacity targets 20,000 participants. So these are the same participants that we survey across time. We expect there's around 2 or 3 times per year that we'll be undertaking rapid surveys with this group. The turnaround from the survey being in the field to data being available is around 8 weeks. And there's a lot of interest in using this rapid survey facility amongst both the policy community and the research community because of the quick turnaround time that's possible and the ability to track how things emerge over time. The next set of opportunities, which we've talked about a lot over the years in 45 and up, is the biospecimen collection, which continues to grow. And through a combination of existing or previous projects and new projects, we're anticipating a collection of around 20,000 samples within the next 12 or 18 months. So a lot of those samples are currently on hand, but a lot of them are being collected through some collaborative research projects that are currently underway. So over time, that's another resource that will become more valuable and will also be available to researchers who are interested in accessing it. Many of those samples are stored at the New South Wales Biobank. So if people are interested in that collection, certainly do get in touch. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight was some new data linkage opportunities. So one of the challenges historically with using 45 and up has been the length of time it takes to get ethics and data custodian approval and also to link the data together before any analysis or research can be conducted. So we've recently established the capacity for enduring linkages, and that allows faster access to 45 and up data in some cases, down to a month or 2, depending on the type of project. So if that's something you're interested in working with us on, please do get in touch. We think we've got a much faster route to enabling access for those that are interested in collaborating with us. And the other thing that's we put a lot of work into in recent times is linking to some new data sets. So people would be aware that 45 and ups routinely linked to lots of administrative data sets, notably MBS, PBS, ED data and hospital data. But in recent times, we've established some linkages with the Australian Immunisation Register dataset. We've now got approval to link to the COVID dataset in New South Wales. And we've had some projects also linked to the Aged Care Data Clearinghouse, which we want to further develop those linkages as well. So if any of those linkages are of interest to you, including the faster access model that we've created, then certainly do get in touch. And I just wanted to finish by sharing my details, but also for those of you who have got some specific questions about what might be in various surveys or what sort of data linkages have been established, or indeed the profile of the cohort more generally, we did recently publish in the International Journal of Epidemiology a cohort profile update that was published in the last 6 months. So it does provide lots of granular detail about the component parts of the cohort and what's available for research. And certainly happy to follow up with anyone that's interested in more detail, but there is that resource for people that want to learn more. So I might stop there, Ian, and stop sharing my screen and see if anyone's got any questions or feedback at this point.
All right, thanks very much, Martin. We might take any questions about the 45 and up study first, and as you say, it's becoming a more valuable resource as the years go on, as these things usually do, and gives us the capability to explore a large number of issues as the numbers become greater in the various subsets. So does anyone have any questions or suggestions for other things that this resource could be utilised for? This is your time now. We didn't want to make the session, the colloquium, a whole lot of didactic presentations, so we decided to give some short presentations and get some feedback from our members. So I'd be very pleased if you'd feedback on any of these. But I do have a couple of other questions specifically that I'd like you to address, and that is, the first is, we talked about our Sax forums, and these are on topics that the members want to engage with and want to actually bring together like members of interest. So we're very interested in collecting from you topics that could be a focus for further Sax forums. So if anyone has suggestions, we'd love to hear them in this meeting or later. We also want to know about any challenges that you might consider we could take on in collaboration with you, pooling our resources. And we're always on the lookout for any new platforms or infrastructure that you may see a necessity for in the future that we might consider developing together. So they're the sort of things we would like you to comment on. So I throw it open to the floor. And I will say we haven't primed anyone with questions, so we're really throwing it onto your good graces to comment. So I open it up. I think you've all been unmuted now. I open it up. And if you'd indicate a question either in the chat function or put your video on and we can get you to ask it live.
Ian, I think Sam Barker has a question.
Right, excellent.
I do. Thanks, Sally. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, my question was to Martin. Thank you, Martin, for providing that overview of the 45 and up study. I guess my question is very specific on just your observation as why the cohort is so highly represented in rural areas.
Yeah.
Obviously, you would try to have a nice breadth of representative samples. So what's happened over time?
It's not so much over time. It was more at recruitment. We oversampled in rural and remote parts of the state, and I didn't go into this in the presentation, but it is captured in that cohort profile paper. We oversampled in the rural and remote parts of the state. And we also oversampled in some of the older populations at that time as well. So
yeah.
I think Amanda helpfully just posted the link to that paper.
Thank you. Yeah.
Which will probably help you get a grip on all of that. Yeah.
Right. And I also just had one about the social isolation and loneliness work. Again, if there's any links or specific
so we've done
what you focused on around there.
Yeah. Again, that paper does describe some of the methods that we use to capture social isolation and loneliness. I think most recently we've been using the Duke index in some of our surveys, but we've also used the Kessler 10 and other measures around mental health and wellbeing more generally. But that's all described in that paper, at least at a high level. But more than happy to regroup with you about that in more detail if it's helpful to do that. Yeah.
Thanks, because we're starting to look more into interventions around social prescribing, certainly in Victoria and more nationally. So that area is of particular interest for us.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Samantha. Other comments or questions or suggestions for topics for Sax forums or new initiatives that we might tackle together, things you want to do that we could enhance your ability to get them done?
I've got another comment. Sorry to
No, by all means, you've got the floor.
With I'm a new member, so this is all very interesting to hear and to learn about what the Sax is doing. Sally, the Sax sonar, I wondered is there any plans to do any horizon scanning work to feed into the Sax sonar in a more proactive way? So looking at new and emerging healthcare practices, technologies to support clinical treatment, or is it more just seeing what comes out of the research that's happening and whether that might inform future thinking?
Good idea to do a kind of more structured horizon scanning. Actually, hadn't really thought about that. We were more thinking about there were ideas bubbling around, you know. So when you talk to people, they often say things like, I think policy should know about this, you know. So it's really to offer a bit of an opportunity to bring those kind of ideas forward.
Yeah.
I think when you talk to policymakers, they talk to you more about the issues that are concerning them now, or maybe a little bit into the future. And so we sort of wanted to try and get away from the idea of trying to do a horizon scan with policymakers, for example, and to try and see where people thought there were these emerging opportunities. But maybe a more structured horizon scanning might be a good way to get started. I think people are finding it difficult just to kind of produce ideas. We kind of thought maybe they were bubbling up when we took the cork out, you know, we'd get a whole lot of them, but that seems not to be the case. So thanks for that. It's a great idea.
Oh, that's right. Well, we did some horizon scanning a few years ago now. You may remember when Nikki was leading our group, Nikki Ellis,
Yes.
and it informed some futures work. And then we did an ongoing program with WorkSafe and the TAC, which had a 3 to 5 year horizon.
Yeah.
But we still have the methodology there. It's very easy to replicate.
That sounds like great. Sounds like we'll have a bit of a multi-topic conversation with you. Offline. That sounds really helpful.
To share. Yeah.
That sounds really helpful, because I actually think that if we can do a couple, it will help people think about the idea, and there'll probably be other things that are lurking in the woodwork that will come forward.
And also help narrow it down to what you're not interested in too. If it starts presenting things and you think, oh no, we're not interested in going in that direction or that direction.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about like single issue studies, but it's quite hard, isn't it? Because some of them are actually really important. So I was thinking about the work that the sort of Jeffrey Braithwaite and others did around sort of safety in the hospital system, which was actually a really important piece of work. And, you know, that might be something that you might take up, even though it was just sort of like one piece of work at the time. So I think there's kind of a range of different sorts of ways of thinking about this that might be valuable. So we'd love to talk more about it with you, and indeed with anybody else who's online who hasn't got a topic right at the top of their mind but would love to be part of the process. So thank you.
And I should say that the board are always interested in meeting the challenge of what's around the corner. So a couple of years ago, for example, we had presentation on artificial intelligence to really find out where it was up to and what capabilities were going to be required in knowledge generation in the future. And that was helpful to us, but it brought up another issue, and that is the issue, well, you know, what role does the Sax have in this? Does it develop capabilities in-house, or does it partner with others who have the capability and make them stronger to do it? I think, you know, I'm fully aware, I've been sitting on some NHMRC and RFF panels, and I'm fully aware that having organisations behind a grant for something is a useful exercise in terms of demonstrating, you know, the breadth of capability that you're able to pull into your particular area. And I think we're always willing to, in the areas of where we have the expertise, to engage with that. But we certainly are interested if people believe there are platforms or infrastructure that is required in the research community in our areas. We'd at least like to know what people think we should be planning towards, because that it's more likely to come from our researchers than from our board. Other issues that people have? I still particularly want a couple of ideas for Sax forums for next year. We don't want to have to plan them all ourselves. Yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Linda Slacksmith from University of Western Australia. Look, not having thought this through very heavily, I'm doing it on the spot, but it's the end of 2022, I think. Maybe some sort of forum about reducing bureaucracy, and I think what we need for a lot of the work we do is stronger, clear governance about data and a lot of the data work we do. But in fact, somehow the lack of clarity often makes the bureaucracy around it quite heavy. So I think something around, like whether it's strengthening the Australian Code of Conduct or does it work, some of those sorts of issues would be really good, and the Sax would be really well placed, I think, in terms of that. And look, I haven't formulated it heavily. I think there's something there that we could work together to make things a bit better on. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sally.
I was going to say it's an interesting issue, Linda, and thanks for that comment, because I think there are things happening, both at the federal level, and then I know Martin has been thinking about some things in relation to Shaw and how it could be useful in that space. So, but I think, some kind of forum where we brought together key players and just sort of talked about what was actually happening, that would be really helpful, just to be clear about where different agencies were up to and what they were thinking about sharing data. Maybe we could get the National, is her name the National Data Commissioner, I think, to come and perhaps give a presentation on where she saw things heading. I think that would be really useful. So yeah, we can certainly do that. It's a great suggestion.
Yeah. There's no doubt that researchers that have been in the field for decades have noticed a almost exponential increase in the amount of paperwork and bureaucracy, and yet on the other hand, of course, we're all reminded recently of the absolute need for data security, and it's just to get the balance between the two. So I think that would be a worthy thing to seek out. Now we have, I can't see all the people.
Somebody... It's PHN, I think.
PP. Yes, go ahead.
So I just want to fix up my background. That's actually the wrong background. I was in another symposium, and but yes, thank you very much. It's PH Ponsavan from Sydney University. Can you see me? My light just went off. Okay.
Very good.
Exactly. Okay. A couple of things. I guess it's relating to the Sax forum. I was interested to see Martin's presentation on the 45 and up, and the fact that you've got about 11% of the core population in your cohort, which is obviously very good. I'm just wondering whether, as an idea going forward, is a forum on how to work with priority populations, vulnerable populations, particularly the cold population. I think that's an area that obviously has is important, given the increasing number of cold populations in Australia, and I know that SAC has been doing fantastically in the area of Aboriginal health, but maybe this is another area, another population group that should be considered as part of the future forums as well. The second area is around, I guess, that topical area, which is also timely, around the social justice, climate justice, and how that links to public health, prevention work, chronic disease prevention. We can actually do a little bit more in terms of dialoguing, and the Sax Institute can be a leader in that space as well, in bringing the disease prevention thinking, marrying it with climate change issue as well, and how public health and medical doctors and so on can actually engage in this space to reduce, I guess, our carbon footprint in this area. The third one is, I guess, it's around linking back to Sally Sona idea as well, and scanning the horizon is, I guess, looking for opportunities in, in new infrastructures, new research idea, innovation is how can we better engage with companies, industry partners as well, in terms of their research. And they've got a lot of, I guess, assets that we can tap into as well. Can we, as public health prevention researchers, engage more with them and get their ideas as well? And I think they're important partners and collaborators in this space. That's it for me, Sally and Ian.
Thanks very much. Sally, you had a comment?
Well, really, that great set of ideas, PH. Thank you, and lovely to see you again. Just wanted to follow up on the first one about core populations, and to say really that I think that's particularly a really stellar idea, and that we've been working with FECA in the last little bit about in relation to the National Health Literacy Strategy, where we're assisting the Commonwealth, and I think that might be a great basis for kind of getting something started. So thanks for that. And then your middle point about climate, I just wondered, Ian, if Lucy Rychiknik might want to respond to that, because I know the Prevention Centre has been doing things in that space. Lucy, do you have anything that you'd like to add there? No.
Sorry, Sally, I was just responding to a phone call. So could you ask that question again?
Well, really, PH said that it would be interesting to use the Sax Forum to try and think a bit more broadly about the impact of climate change and the challenges for prevention. I think I've got that right, PH. Is that sort of right? Yeah. And I know that you've been leading some work there around this with the Prevention Centre, so I just might want to comment.
Just to say, I totally agree, PH. I think it's a very, it's a real growing area of interest, and certainly in our network of chronic disease prevention researchers and policy partners, there's a real growing interest in those synergies, and particularly with the announcement just a couple of weeks ago by the federal government of developing a national strategy on climate change and health. So I think that's a real opportunity, and I think it would be a great idea, and also linking in with the Healthy Environment and Lives network, so the NHMRC special initiative led by Satiris. I think there's real opportunities there. We've certainly been promoting their conference to our chronic disease prevention networks, because I think the opportunities for people working in climate and environmental health and chronic disease prevention, linking, I mean, some people straddle the two, but I think there's real opportunity for enabling much more collaboration across those research fields. So I think it's a great idea.
And maybe also if people want to find out more about the Prevention Centre, really great website. So you might want to have
I'll stick it in the chat.
That'll be great, Lucy.
All right. Great. Thanks very much. I mean, the call there is challenging because of its heterogeneity, really. And that's the one we've got to get over. But good to hear from you, Karen. You've got a comment, Karen Canfor.
Sorry, I was having a bit of trouble here with my system. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Sally. And actually, I just really prompted a little bit actually by PH's comments and again, that issue of the core population. I suppose a sort of a linked idea for a forum might be something around, how best to engage consumers and community in research. And I didn't introduce myself, I'm sorry, but I'm from the Daffodil Centre, which is Cancer Council New South Wales and the University of Sydney. And so in the cancer space, there are many different models of how to effectively do this. And I think the thinking's changing over time about, really we need to do more than token efforts to have a consumer on our committee and, on various committees, advisory committees for research. And I think there's these linked but not exactly the same concepts of the consumer and the impact of communities, and there are different models around for actually how to involve groups in research and for there to be true co-leadership and co-design and things. So I think we're really interested in exploring what evidence there is for what works best, what are the emerging concepts, how can we build the evidence for actually doing this better in the future. And so that's just an idea I put on the table perhaps for a forum.
Yeah, look, thanks very much, Karen. That's a really timely idea, because as we're seeing on MRFF panels and so on, that consumer engagement is really important, and it's how to meaningfully have them co-design right from the beginning, the first genesis of the idea, and then co-lead these things. And you know, some researchers seem to have an innate idea of how to do that, and some don't. And I think, but there's no evidence for how it's going to be most effective, and I think that's the problem with
it's building that evidence base that I think
yeah,
is a challenge right now.
it might sound good, but does it actually make a difference? Or presumably it could actually throw things off track if you did it the wrong way. So I think that's an excellent suggestion. Thanks very much for that. Right, other comments on either new platforms or shared challenges that we could meet, or indeed any other ideas for Sax forums?
There's a comment in the chat that Amy wants to speak to that. It's talking about the appropriation of AI ADM into public health.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I think, so my name's Niamh Stevenson. I'm here for Rebecca Ivers from UNSW. And I think there's, in my mind, there's a crossover, and it might just be me, between what Kate's talking about and what PH is talking about. Oh, sorry, the second PH means public health. Yeah, and it was just something about looking at the kind of future trajectories of how data infrastructures are developing or being regulated with social injustice and addressing social injustice in mind. And it folds in with the idea of inviting the ONDC to come and speak. You know, I'm just thinking about with the ONDC, with the data bill that was passed recently. You know, the representation and the submissions on the part of people interested in Indigenous health, they were really strong. And certainly I saw them being acknowledged and spoken to in a very clear way. But it does seem like the bill perhaps has put it in the too hard basket. Yeah, so just to kind of open up that kind of discussion and think about social justice also in relation to CALD.
Yeah. Sally, I guess it's be worth commenting. We've, it seems, had fairly positive experiences with our engagement with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community. Would you like to comment on your impressions of that?
Yes. So I mean, I think we've really been privileged in the work we've done with Aboriginal communities in New South Wales. So really, I just want to recognise the leadership of Sandra Bailey here, who was the head of the Aboriginal Health and Medical Research Council until relatively recently. And I think we've worked with about 4 Aboriginal community controlled health services really for about 20 years. And just recently, Martin's been able to broaden that so that we're now, I think, working with 9 and across a broad range of different kinds of areas. But I think this issue of data and data ownership and has been a really central issue right from the beginning. So there were a lot of discussions when we were first starting this this work about who owned the data, which I saw something I'd never thought about in terms of research really before. You know, like you collected your data set, but there was a lot of sensitivity amongst the ACCHSs about ownership and about the rules around governing release of those data and who could be trusted and how that would be shown in the public domain. And so I know that's not quite the same thing as what you're getting at, but just following on from Ian's comments, you know, I think we have, you know, we have been very privileged, and I think the relationships have gone well. But I would say that, you know, that issue around data continues to be something that worries people. I think, you know, we did some surveys amongst people who've been part of research programs some time back to explore what their responses had been, and many of them put the issue of how we manage the data who owned the data at sort of the heart of their comments. So I think it's a very live issue, and really great to see a kind of developing thinking there.
Right, thanks very much. We've got about 5 minutes to go. If there's any last questions, we'd be pleased to have them, or comments on anything that's been discussed today. You can even ask about the financial statements if you're interested in this sort of thing.
I think there's some really great ideas there.
Yeah, look, I think
really exciting things.
Well,
yeah.
So look, I'd like to first thank all the people at Sally, Melinda, Martin for presenting today, and I'd like to thank all the members that have come to the colloquium to have an update on things. We want to continue to engage with you, and we invite you to email us or to participate in the various forums that we'll run, continue to run over the next few years. So we're delighted to have the chance to interact with you in this way. And I thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll call it an afternoon. Thank you.
Bye.